Please remember to download both the BarnBurner and the Zingo TV apps in the respective app store on the iOS and Android stores. Zingo TV is available on Roku and Roku sticks, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Google Chromecast, and smart TVs from 2016 onward. The apps are free, so download them today. So I'm your host, Sabrina, and you're here for Serie A Back of the Net. So for this episode, I am going to go over the last Serie A match day, and then I'll go through and discuss everything that happened with regards to the Serie A clubs on the transfer deadline day, which was yesterday. And then I'm going to end with a segment that I like to call Il Buono, Il Brutto, e Il Cattivo. So let's start off with the matches for match day 3. So kicking off the match day, we had Fiorentina, who hosted Sampdoria at the Artemio Franchi. Sampdoria came into their match having lost their last 2 matches, and the last one being a game against Inter where it looked like they were going to be able to secure all 3 points, but ultimately some late goals from Inter saw them drop it at the last minute. Sampdoria also came into the match having lost their opening 2 matches, and their last one was a loss from a comeback from Serie A newcomers Benevento. So both these teams are looking to grab some points here, so it was sure to be an interesting matchup. The game started off with teams trading chances early on, none of which caused too much trouble for either goalkeeper. But then in the 41st minute, Fiorentina defender Ceccherini inexplicably pulled down Sampdoria striker Fabio Quagliarella in the box, which of course resulted in a penalty for Sampdoria. So the veteran Fabio Quagliarella steps up, makes no mistake, and he converts the spot kick, which gives Sampdoria the lead going into halftime. Then we're deep in the second half when Fiorentina center back Milenkovic threads the ball through a very crowded penalty area to Dusan Vlahovic, who quickly controls and buries the ball in the back of the net to draw La Viola early level on points. Then Sampdoria, who could have taken the lead a little bit earlier, ultimately got their goal ruled out when the goal from Thorsby was ruled out because of VAR check that Tonali had actually handballed it. So the game looked like it was going to end with a 1-1 draw, which I'm sure each side would have been happy with. But in the 83rd minute, the goalkeeper, Audero, that's right, I said goalkeeper, provided a beautiful long ball to Valerio Verre, who ended up chipping it over the Fiorentina goalkeeper Dragowski and ended up securing all 3 points for the Blue Cerchiati. So a very crazy match. Samp ends up winners. Very excellent to see. Let's move on now to Sassuolo versus Crotone. Sassuolo were looking to continue their good opening to the season against the newly promoted Crotone, who had lost their opening 2 fixtures since being promoted to the Italian top flight. In the first quarter of the match, Gregoire Defrel switched play with a cross to Domenico Berardi, who promptly controlled it, fed it back into Defrel, who had since made the run into space, and then laid it back off to Berardi, who drove home the ball to open the scoring for the Neroverdi. So Sassuolo were able to hold on to this lead going into the break at halftime. But a few minutes into the second half, a very late and poor clearing attempt from Burabia on Cigarini saw a penalty awarded to the southern side. Simi stepped up for Crotone and Consigli went the other way. So that saw the away team draw level. Less than 10 minutes later, Sassuolo were also awarded a penalty, which was due to a handball from Pereira. And fan favorite, not just of Sassuolo, but an Italian fan favorite, Ciccio Caputo, stepped up and converted, bringing the Neroverdi ahead once again. Later on in regulation time, a quick counter launched by Domenico Berardi saw Caputo add to his tally, bringing Sassuolo up by 3-1. And then in the dying minutes of the match, we had Manuel Locatelli, who tried very unselfishly to set up Berardi right in the 18-yard box, but unfortunately his pass was intercepted. However, the ball ended up being loose in the area, and the youngster quickly gathered up the loose ball, bagged a goal for himself in the 93rd minute which sealed the win for the Nero Verdi with a 4-1 convincing win over Crotone. Next up, we had Udinese versus Roma. Juventus target Edin Dzeko was once again very wasteful in front of the net when in the 21st minute he skied a shot over the bar despite being one-on-one against the keeper, where he could have actually kind of deked around, got around the keeper and had an open net. Unfortunately, he missed, but luckily for Roma, Lasagna, who had an opportunity not long after, who was also one-on-one with Mirante, also shot the ball wide, and the game remained 0-0. The two sides ended up trading chances until probably about the 55th minute when a new signing, Pedro, intercepts a very poor pass between Udinese players, fires the ball off of the post and into the net from outside of the box. Udinese did have a lot more chances to level it up, but the mix of great saves from Roma goalkeeper Mirante and a lot of wasteful chances saw the Giallorossi claim all 3 points in this match. Then we had Atalanta welcome Cagliari to Bergamo, and it didn't take long for the home side to open the scoring when Luis Muriel scored a breakaway in the 7th minute. Not long later, new Cagliari center back Diego Godin leveled the Sardinian side with a really lovely header from a corner. But anyone who watches Serie A knows you can never count Atalanta out, and sure enough, their captain, Papu Gomez, fired a beautiful shot and put the Nero Azzurri ahead in the 29th minute. From then, it was just a flurry of goals for Atalanta, seeing Pasalic net one in the 37th and Zapata get one in the 42nd. Then João Pedro would end up pulling one back for Cagliari in the 52nd minute, but it wasn't enough for the Sardinian side to mount a comeback, when in the end, new Atalanta signing Lammers scored a beautifully worked goal in the 81st minute, which just put the cherry on top of a very dominant win for the boys from Bergamo. Now on to another one of the Sunday morning games. We had newcomers Benevento face off against Bologna. The teams played to a stalemate going into the break at halftime, but then in the second half, Gianluca Lapadula opened the scoring with a sliding effort from a corner. And then Bologna leveled in the 69th minute, but lo and behold, we had another goal ruled off from VAR. Once the VAR check was completed, it was deemed that it was in fact a handball, so the goal got ruled off. Bologna kept knocking at the door, but ultimately they weren't able to score, meaning that Pippo Inzaghi's men earned their second win in as many games, which is really impressive for the newly promoted side. Then we had Parma, who hosted Verona at the Tardini, and the home side was extremely desperate for a win, given that they lost their opening 2 matches of the season. And so Parma wasted absolutely no time with Yasmin Kurtic pounding it into the back of the net in the 25th second. The match ended up staying like that, although Verona had their chances to even it up, ultimately weren't able to. And so Parma get their first win of the season, and also really important to note, this is their first win under their new coach Fabio Liberani and their new owner Kyle Krause. All right, let's move on to the last of the Sunday morning games, which was Lazio versus Inter. It was a very sunny day in Rome, and it was very evident, in case you couldn't see the sunshine, by Inter goalkeeper Handanovic, who wore his signature baseball cap, which he does whenever it's sunny. Martinez was the one to break the deadlock in the 30th minute. He went through a very crowded Lazio penalty area, was able to shoot the ball into the bottom right corner. But then early in the second half, we had Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, who tracked into the area, got on the end of a cross from Acerbi, and ended up scoring the equalizer for Lazio. But in the end, that was all the excitement from a sporting perspective. We had the rest of the match that was littered with some physical shenanigans, I like to call it. In the 69th minute, Vidal tackled Immobile. Immobile went down, and Vidal went over, kind of seemed like he was just going to check on him, see if he was okay. And when he touched Immobile, Immobile fell over and ended up extending his hand outward and slapped Vidal in the face. Vidal went down like a sack of potatoes, and it ended up resulting in a red card for Ciro Immobile. So, advantage Inter, or you would think. Inter were unable to convert any of their chances. They did have a really good chance, but the ball ended up hitting off the post and coming out, and they weren't able to hop on that rebound and get the ball into the back of the net. Then came back to haunt them kind of when they had a throw in, and Stefano Sensi went to go take the throw in, and Lazio's Patrick got in his face, and Sensi inexplicably shoved him, which of course got him a sending off. So at the final whistle, the score remained 1-1 in what could have been a really, really entertaining match sporting wise, but ended up being more about people getting slapped in the face. Okay, so this brings us to what was ultimately the last match of the weekend, Milan versus Spezia. Milan were coming off a very long and very tiring Europa League qualifier against the Portuguese side Rio Ave. They were also without Ibrahimovic, who unfortunately tested positive for the coronavirus, so was only able to play the first league game for Milan and has been out since. Also, we had Captain Romagnoli, who has been out since the end of last season with an injury, and Ante Rebic, who in the last game in the Serie A, unfortunately dislocated his elbow, and so he is still out because of that injury. So it wasn't the most convincing first half of football for Milan, and in the end, it was Spezia who ended up having more chances up until the halftime. But when play resumed, Stefano Pioli, it seemed like he really knew he had to make a change. He had tried to play some of his subs and some of his younger players, seeing as how this squad had a very tiring and challenging game last Thursday. But the game called for it, so he put on the very informed Hakan Çalhanoğlu, who made an immediate impact, getting into the game, drawing a yellow card. But then in the 57th minute, he supplied a fantastic assist to Rafael Leao, who converted the ball. And then in the 75th minute, we had Theo Hernandez, who intercepted a Spezia pass at the halfway line and made a marauding run forward, fires the ball into the back of the net, and gave Milan a 2-0 lead. Then late in the game, Rafael Leao honed in on a loose ball in Spezia's 6-yard box, and making no mistake, he puts the ball in the back of the net to give him his brace and ultimately secure all 3 points for the Milanese side, who remain unbeaten since the restart, dating back to when Serie A restarted after the lockdown. Okay, so in what was going to be the late game on Saturday, Genoa versus Torino, the game ended up being postponed, which was due to 14 positive COVID-19 cases on the Genoa squad, which was actually between their team and their staff members. There's still no word on when that game is going to be rescheduled for, so we'll just have to keep an eye out for whenever they decide to put that in. And that brings us to Juventus versus Napoli. So this was definitely going to be the marquee matchup of the weekend. However, it wasn't played. And in true Serie A fashion, the reason behind that is insane. So there's a lot of misinformation with this, but I'll just say from what we know, from what was available, this is how the story seemed to have unfolded. So the catalyst for this situation was the weekend before when Napoli played Genoa. The match was delayed for hours because Genoa had a few players test positive for COVID-19, and I think they were waiting to see the rest of the players if they, tested positive or negative. In the end, the rest of the squad was clear and the match went ahead. Then the Genoa players arrived home after their match, and another round of testing showed that they had the 14 new positive cases, as I mentioned a bit earlier. So Napoli also then went through a round of testing because they had just played against Genoa. And so far, they found that they had had 2 players test positive for the virus. So that's what we know. That's what's for sure. And then from there, it gets really murky. So on Saturday, there were reports that had come out that the local health authorities in Napoli said that they could not travel because there was a spike in cases in their province of Campania. As a result of this, when this came out, Juventus said they were still going to take the field, even if Napoli didn't travel to Torino. After that, it was a firestorm of different reports. So we had reports that the local authorities, in fact, did not tell Napoli that they couldn't travel. Then we heard that there were reports that if they did travel, they would face criminal charges. And then finally, the local authorities came out and said that they told Napoli they could not travel and they had to follow isolation protocols. So Sunday, game's approaching. There's still no word from the league as the match was postponed or if the match was still going ahead. Napoli's social media was very quiet, but Juventus has continued on with their game day rituals, posting a lineup, showing the team getting off the bus, going into the stadium, and so on. Game time hit. I tuned in to see what was going to go on, and the video feed was playing here in Canada for DAZN. And it was just panning around the stadium, which had now there's allowed to have a few members of the public in to watch the game. So there were some fans there, but there was really nothing going on. And there was a banner on the screen that said, awaiting the away team. And then eventually the stream just finally ended. After this game, the Juventus president, Andrea Agnelli, said that he had received word from Aurelio De Laurentiis, who's the president of Napoli, before the game, where the Napoli president asked him for his support to try and get this game postponed because they had their hands tied. They weren't allowed to travel. Agnelli said, out of his own words, said that he told the Napoli president no, and said that these are the rules, these are the protocols. We are fine. We're going to go to the stadium. We're going to take the field. And he also said, Juventus always follow the rules, which really got some Serie A fans riled up because we all know what went down in 2006. But yeah, he just insisted Juventus were following protocol, and it is what it is. So now it's Tuesday, situation still not resolved. The league was supposed to come out with a decision either today or tomorrow about whether or not this game was going to be rescheduled. And if it wasn't going to be rescheduled, if Napoli would be forced to forfeit and get a 1-point deduction, and Juventus would subsequently be handed the 3-0 win. But as of now, we don't have anything to say what's going to happen. So just a waiting game at this point. Now let's talk briefly about transfers. We had the transfer window close yesterday, and there was a lot of action from Serie A clubs. The most notable of the deadline day deals was the loan that sent Federico Chiesa to Juventus from Fiorentina. The move is technically a loan. However, the targets that Chiesa has to achieve in order to make this move permanent are extremely achievable for a player of Chiesa's quality. And, he has been trying to get a move out of Florence for the probably last 2 seasons. And it's finally come. It's come to Juventus, who seem to be his preferred club to go to. So now it's up to him to show everyone what he's made of and see if he actually merited that move. In other news, Juventus were also able to loan out Douglas Costa, who was a really good player for them, unfortunately suffered a lot of injuries. So they were able to move him to Bayern Munich on a dry loan. We also had Roma, who were quite active on deadline day. They were finally able to close the Chris Smalling deal that they've been trying to work on since the market opened. They were able to loan out their goalkeeper, Robin Olsen. Justin Kluivert went to Leipzig, and Diego Perotti went to Fenerbahce. They're trying to get El Shaarawy back from his club in China, but the deal wasn't able to be done in time, and so they move on. And finally, we had Bakayoko, who went to Napoli, where he will be able to reunite with Gennaro Gattuso. Now we'll move on to the segment Il Buono, Il Brutto, Il Cattivo, which is the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to talk about anyone who falls into that category, whether it's a team, a player, an official, so on. So I'll start with the good. Atalanta, definitely one of my good guys this weekend. They showed their attacking prowess once again, making it 13 goals in 3 games since the season started. I also have Milan as one of my good guys. They managed to come up with a 3-0 win after that very long game on Thursday and missing a bunch of key players. And they remain unbeaten with Atalanta at the top of the table. And final good guy for the weekend is Sassuolo. This Roberto De Zerbi side continues to impress, and the performances by Caputo, Locatelli, and Berardi were enough to earn them call-ups to Mancini's Italy squad. For the bad, I have the collapsing of the deal of Stefan El Shawari. You know, the former Roma player left the club to go to China a few years ago, but he's always claimed that Roma is still in his heart, and he really wanted to move back to Italy because the Euros are coming up next summer. But he also really wanted to return to Roma, and unfortunately the deal couldn't be done in time, leaving the player very upset. And finally, I'll talk about the ugly of the weekend. My first ugly of the weekend is the last quarter of that Lazio-Inter match. The game could have been an excellent game, just a really good display between top 4 contenders. And instead, it was reduced to a literal shoving match. Anyways, my final ugly for the weekend was the whole Juventus-Napoli debacle. But I think the real ugly part was the Lega Serie A. From what we know, the league did not, but definitely could have stepped in, postponed the game as they did with Genoa Torino. But instead, their inaction caused a whole lot of unnecessary drama. So for that, they get one of my uglies of the week. So that brings me to the end of what happened in Serie A this past week. Thank you guys for joining me on Serie A Back of the Net. And until next time, ciao.